Fresh meat.
There was a time when a new movie starring Eddie Murphy would mean an instant box office hit. During his early days on Saturday Night Live, it was easy to see how his charisma and comedic timing would translate to the big screen. Once he started making movies, fans turned out in droves. 48 Hours, Trading Places, and Beverly Hills Cop made him a name that could be counted on to bring in money for any studio that was lucky enough to have him in their film. By the mid-90s, he had begun a downward slide. Movies like The Distinguished Gentleman and Beverly Hills Cop 3 had underperformed at the box office, and some wondered if the box office shine had worn off. Murphy was in need of a comeback hit. One person who was excited to try and give it to him was, of all people, Wes Craven. After some horror hits of the last decade, Craven was ready to try and move up the Hollywood ladder and was hoping, by teaming with a big star, it would help push him up a few rungs. But you know the name of the show you're watching, so let's find out what happened during Vampire in Brooklyn here on What the F*** Happened to This Horror Movie. The story goes that Eddie Murphy had one more movie left on his contract with Paramount, and he was anxious to get out of it so that he could head over to Universal and star in the Nutty Professor remake. He decided on a film written by his brother, Charlie Murphy, that could see him stretch his abilities and venture into the horror genre. Vampire in Brooklyn seemed to be in good hands when Murphy sought out Wes Craven to direct the film. Murphy was a fan of his work and thought his horror expertise would lend to the making of the film. Wes was happy to come on board and excited to be working with Murphy. He liked the script, but wanted to bring in a few writers to polish it up and bring in a fresh pair of eyes. Chris Parker and Michael Lucker would pitch their changes to Wes, who loved them. What followed was an almost stereotypical series of events that you would hear about working in Hollywood. After meeting with Wes, he instructed them that they had to pitch it to the vice president of Paramount. The next day, they showed up at Paramount to go through their pitch again. The vice president loved it. He said they had to come back the next day and pitch it to the president of Paramount. So the next day they showed up again and pitched their changes to the president of Paramount. He loved them. Then he said he had to pitch these changes to Eddie Murphy. So the following Monday, they flew to New York and again pitched their changes to Murphy. During their pitch, they said he seemed to become distracted and walked over to play the piano. Oof. He agreed to their changes, but this would only be the first of many issues with Eddie Murphy on the production of this movie. I want to thank you guys for watching What the F*** Happened to This Horror Movie, and ask that if you enjoy our shows, please subscribe to our channel right now, like this video, and click on the bell so you can be notified each time a new video goes up. And now, back to the show. In Vampire in Brooklyn, an ancient vampire by the name of Maximilian would leave his island home in the Bermuda Triangle to travel to New York. Here, he hopes to find a woman who is supposed to be half vampire. He quickly turns a half-witted street con artist into his ghoul assistant. They quickly turn their attention to Detective Rita Vedder. If Max can turn her to his side, he'll no longer be the last of his kind. The film shot for a few days in Brooklyn before the rest of the production was moved to the back lot of Paramount. During this time, Murphy had his trailer brought to the lot and backed right up to the edge of the set. Multiple crew members have commented that it was not uncommon for Murphy to lock himself in his trailer and refuse to come out. As was starting to become commonplace for Murphy, he would end up playing multiple roles in this film. They were actually able to have this make sense in the film, as the vampire character of Max could shapeshift into different forms. During one scene, he transforms into a preacher. After getting through makeup for the shot, Murphy decided that the content of the scene was too sacrilegious and refused to come out of his trailer. The screenwriters were sent to come up with a different approach to the scene that Murphy would agree with before they could finally get shooting started. Some reported that he had spies working on the set, and if the crew wasn't 100% set up and waiting for him, he would just stay in his trailer. This led to a lot of frustration between a lot of the set, but it was reported that co-star Angela Bassett was 100% professional during the shoot. Often, she would have to work with Murphy's stand-in for her scenes, but never complained or caused any problems. During the shooting of the opening scene, where the boat arrives into the harbor, it turns out Murphy didn't even bother showing up. After lighting the scene and getting the fog machines going, they said they were ready for Murphy, but were then told he was still at home. By the crew's determination, that meant it would take him 2 hours to get to the set, and then another 2 hours to get into makeup. This was the first week of shooting. Some think that Murphy was doing all this on purpose to mess with Paramount, since it was his last film for them. I'm sure the rest of the cast and crew appreciated his tantrums. Cinematographer Mark Irwin claims that drugs may have played a part in Murphy's erratic behavior. After shooting for a few weeks, there was suddenly a problem with the contact lenses that Eddie was wearing during his more vamped out scenes. It didn't seem to fit anymore. A new pair had to be made to fix this. Irwin claims that Murphy had been smoking so much dope that his eyes had expanded. Is that a real side effect? No wonder the Cookie Monster is always so hungry. While he wasn't dealing with Murphy's antics on set, Craven at least got to bring in some other actors from some of his other projects to fill out some of the side characters. Eagle-eyed viewers will see Jesu Garcia from A Nightmare on Elm Street and Mitch Pileggi from Shocker as some thugs that are dispatched by Max not long after he arrives in New York. In the police station, Wendy Roby from The People Under the Stairs shows up as a woman that Max controls to cause a distraction. Joanna Cassidy from Invitation to Hell and Zakes Moquet from Serpent in the Rainbow both get small supporting roles in the film. While these stories do make Murphy come off as annoying to deal with and seem to contribute to a tense set, one tragedy didn't involve him at all. While filming, a stunt woman lost her life when she was doing a jump from the top of a building. The first night they filmed her falling about 8 feet onto the top of a cab. This went off without a hitch, and everything looked perfect. The next night, they're going to film the other half of the stunt, which required stunt woman Sonia Davis to fall onto an airbag from the roof of a building. There are conflicting reports on what actually happened. Some crew members say that the stunt coordinator told Davis not to push off from the building, but to just fall back naturally. Davis then allegedly pushed off the building, which made her fly too far back. This resulted in her hitting her head on the opposite wall and ended up missing most of the airbag. Her mother and brother had been visiting the set that day and saw the entire thing, with her brother even capturing it on his video camera. Davis was rushed to hospital, where she remained in a coma for 2 weeks before her body finally gave out. A lawsuit was filed against the production for unsafe working environments. Her mother claims that Davis was unsure about the stunt and even said so from the top of the building before the stunt took place. Other stunt performers have said that sometimes stunts were performed even when the performers were unsure of it due to the fear of getting a bad reputation in Hollywood. Pulling out of a stunt at the last minute could be looked at as being problematic and could cause them to not be hired on future productions. Paramount was found not to have purchased proper permits. Whether this could have led to the death of the stunt woman is unknown. In the middle of the case against Paramount by the Davis family, their attorney died of a heart attack. Whether the case ended up being settled out of court or was dropped, no one is sure. After the film was released, it was up to the audience to decide if it was going to be Murphy's comeback film or not. They decided it was not. Well, it wasn't an abject failure. It only managed to break even after marketing is factored in. Audiences didn't seem to want to take Murphy seriously in the role. Should he have gone more comedic? Maybe even taken it a bit more seriously? Reports are conflicting on what the tone was supposed to be. Craven had stated in interviews that he wanted Murphy to get a little more comedic with the role and that the overall tone of the film should have leaned more towards the comedic route. Eddie's brother and screenwriter Charlie Murphy said that the film originally was supposed to be a straight-up horror film, but that when Craven came on board, he had a different view of the film and wanted it to be more comedic. When you look at the character of Julius Jones as Max's ghoul assistant, this is very apparent. Taking the approach that through the entire film his body begins to fall apart, you can see the humorous touch that Craven was trying to add. According to Craven, Murphy wanted to go more the straight route while filming, so this caused the dysfunction of Eddie's performance to being out of whack with the rest of the movie. Cinematographer Mark Irwin says the opposite happened during filming. He claims West had problems getting Murphy to be serious, and that Murphy kept wanting to go more towards the jokes. Irwin says this was Murphy's default position. He felt it was his fallback position. Anytime he got too serious, he would get nervous about how people would see him in the film and think it might be better to get a laugh rather than a serious take. Paramount seemed to want Murphy to play the character more like his Beverly Hills Cop character Axel Foley. Screenwriter Chris Parker said Paramount even instructed them to try to trick Murphy into being funny. They said Murphy didn't want to be funny, and that it was their job to try and trick him into being funny. What a weird request. Murphy himself has a completely different take on what caused the film to flop. During an interview, he stated, quote, "The only way I was able to do Nutty Professor was to get out of my Paramount deal. I had to do Vampire in Brooklyn. But you know what ruined the movie? The wig. I walked out in that long-haired wig, and people said, 'Oh, get the out of here. What the hell is this?' Well, I'm not sure the wig could be completely blamed for the failure of the movie. It didn't help matters any. While the film was a failure at the box office, it would end up becoming a cult classic later in its life. It may not completely work as a horror film, but it does have a few impressive scenes. The opening shot of the ship crashing into the other boats in New York Harbor is an homage to part of the Dracula story, where the ship the Dementor arrives in London. Just like in the story, the ship shows up with all the crew on board killed, and a wolf escapes onto land. During his first encounter with Julius Jones, Max kills the thugs that are after him. The special effects hold up pretty well as they get torn apart, and Julius falling apart as his body decays was exceptionally well done throughout the film. The tone overall seems to be the main issue, and with the difficulties during filming, this is not a surprise. Vampire in Brooklyn didn't end up being Murphy's big comeback movie, but he would get to the next movie, The Nutty Professor. With the use of new technology, Murphy was able to pour his comedic talents into multiple characters and different versions of his visual appearance that audiences ate up. After this, he would once again find himself stuck in a downward spiral, only stuck in family-friendly movies that limited his comedic talents. He finally started to break free when he starred in the Netflix movie Dolomite Is My Name. Wes Craven didn't have to wait long before becoming a part of another groundbreaking horror franchise. A year after Vampire in Brooklyn, he would helm the first movie in the Scream franchise. This would completely reinvigorate the horror genre and once again cause a deluge of slasher films to hit the screens for better or worse. He would ultimately direct 4 films in the franchise, before sadly passing away in 2015 after battling brain cancer. There's a good story somewhere in Vampire in Brooklyn. If only everything would have aligned to give us a great horror film with Eddie Murphy and directed by Wes Craven. Alas, instead we are left with a movie that seems obvious the star didn't want to be there and did everything he could to make it a complicated production. Sometimes, fame and fortune can turn even the best of us into egomaniacal actors. At least, that's what I hope happens to me when I grow up.
Drive the limo and shut your fucking mouth. Shut up!
Thanks for watching our show. If you like what you see, please subscribe to our JoBlo videos channel. Tell your friends who like this sort of content and turn on the bell to receive notifications for all our latest videos. We are an independent company and we appreciate your support. And if you have any suggestions for future episodes, please leave them in the comments below.